Alright, so look, this is really simple, okay? Just watch where my cursor is and you'll figure out how everything works, okay? So first of all, we start off with the import turtle. This is basically the program that we're using. Well, we're using Python right now, but this is the program inside the program so that we can pick up like a tiny little box that shows us what everything is working on. And then WN screen, that just shows up the screen that I was talking about with the title Pong, which is like, you know how there's like a little text up here that tells you what you're doing, like the Google thing, and it'll tell you all that stuff. That's what it is, basically. Now you want the background color to be black, just like this background color you see back here, right? We want it to be 800 high and 600 long, right? So that means that it'll be like 600 pixels this way and 800 pixels this way. So it'll be like about this size here, right? Really simple, right? Okay, so then we have score. So that means that score equals A, which means that basically if I want to change the score at all, I have to do is put score A plus equals and then 1. So that means that it will add 1 score to the score, and then that's basically it. Okay. So this is paddle A, right? This is the paddle on the left side, the paddle that basically hits the ball back and forth. Paddle A needs to be a turtle. That means that you're using a physical object from the turtle thing. So like remember how turtle this is a thing, right? So basically, you're picking an object from this little website right here, or this little program, and then you're using an object from that thing. And that's this paddle A speed, that just makes like how quick it loads into the thing. So like either you can make it 5 seconds, so that 5 seconds into the thing, it'll start to show up, right? Or you can make it 0, which means that it'll instantly show up, right? Pretty simple. So then we want the paddle, because since we're using turtle, we can just write square, right? So then a square will pop up. And then since it's Pong, we want it to be white, right? So then, since it's not Pong yet, because if it's a square, that means that it's not necessarily like the long rectangle thing. And this website does not have rectangles, it only has squares. So basically, shape size, we just have to like change the shape, right? So basically, we'll stretch the width so that it'll go up and down a lot longer than it will go left and right. So then it'll be stretch width by 5 and stretch length by 1, so that the 1 stays the same, but this multiplies by 5. So that means if it's 20 pixels, then that means it'll be 100 pixels tall and 20 pixels still wide, because this is how it works. Anyways, the pen up just makes it so that if I want this block to move from one location to another, it will not move, like it won't draw a line between those two locations. And then we want the paddle to go to negative 350. We make that because we want the paddle to start at the left and not in the middle, because it'll automatically change everything to the middle. And then basically you can just copy and paste this over here, but change it all to paddle B, which is the right side. And then make this a positive one, because we don't want it to be on the same size as and the same side as panel A. Okay, so now we go to the ball, right? We just do the same thing. Ball equals turtle, so that makes it a object, right? Speed 0, which means it'll instantly show up. And then we want the shape to be a circle this time, because in Pong, it's either a circle or a tiny square. But this time I'm going to go circle because they have circle. And then you want it to be white because of Pong. We want it to be peanut so that it doesn't show a line between each one. We want it to go to 0, 0, which is already where it goes at, but I'm just making sure that it doesn't spawn anywhere else. Now you see how this says ball speed. This is a note, right? So that basically a note, you can just type anything in here and nothing will happen. And like most of the code, if I was to write ha 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 here, right, it'll show up and it won't run the code because, oh hey, there's a discrepancy. You wrote that wrong. So then if you put the pound number before it, then that means that it will not be counted as code, and that's mostly just for like if I wanted if I was working with a team, or if I was working on my own on a week-long project, then that means that I can know what everything does without having to remember every single code by its own code. Okay, and then the dx, this is basically how much the x-axis is changing, and then the number is the speed. Right now I have it for 0.17. Most computers, you have to change it because most computers' refresh rate is kind of different, so either it'll go super fast or it'll go super slow. So I have mine really small so that it actually is the speed of Pong. And then the dy, that just changes the y-axis, right? So then these two can communicate to each other. So whenever one moves, the other moves at the same time, and it makes it look like it's going diagonally. Okay, now pen. Pen is basically this is for the score. We want the score to show up, because right now I only have the score as an object. It's not visible, it's nothing. So we just want the turtle, right, so that it becomes an actual object. We want the pen speed to be 0, so that it immediately shows up. We want it to be white because of Pong. We want it to be peanut, so that we don't see a line between each consecutive movement. And then we want to hide the turtle because we don't want to see the turtle. We only want to see the text that the turtle writes. And then we wanted to go to 260. Remember how I said that this thing was only 600 in height, so that means that it's going 300 up and 300 down, because that's how it works. So if we have S260, that means it leaves 40 pixels from above the screen that it doesn't show anything. And we want pen right A to this. Okay, I'll show you what this all is. So in the parentheses, this is what you'll see on the screen. And then a line, that means that it's going to show up on the center of the screen. It's not going to show on the very left, not on the very right. And then the font, we want it to be Courier because that's basically the Pong font. And then we want the font size to be 24, and we don't want it to be italicized. We don't want it to be bold, so we just write normal. Okay. Now the function. This is basically how the paddles move, which this is pretty simple, honestly. So we want to define paddle up, right? So to define paddle up, so that it moves up, we want it to be so the y-axis is paddle A y core. That just means that the y equals the y coordinates of the paddle, which means that whenever it moves up, it won't just leave a line below it, and instead it'll just move to the position that it was just changed to. And then you'll see y plus equals 20, right? That just means that it's going up 20 or it's going down. Well, right now it's only going up 20 because as positive, y side, this up here is positive, this down here is negative, right? So you want it to be a plus. So that means that as it goes up, it's going up 20 every single time. And then paddle set y, that just moves it to the new coordinate that it was just here, right? Okay, now definition paddle down, this is basically the same thing except that you're doing a minus 20 because as this is the side that is as this is the negative side, that just means that it has to go down 20. Basically, this thing is just a big old coordinate plane. So that this is the positive, this is the first one, this is the second one, this is third, this is fourth, right? So that this is the positive, this is negative, positive, negative, 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 positive. Okay, pretty simple, right? And then then you'll see that this is for the paddle B, the one on the right side, right? So then that just makes it the same thing as over here. It's blah blah blah. Plus equals 20, yada yada. Minus equals 20, same thing, except that it's just on this side. Okay, and then on the keyboard binding, WN listen. This just means that it's going to pay attention to any keyboard binding that you push. So if I was to put the period button, it would be like, oh hey, he clicked period button. The period button isn't bind to anything, so it's just going to do nothing. But hey, if we put WN on key press, that means that if I press this key, something will happen. And then I put paddle A up. So now it'll use this, since this is defined as paddle A up, then it'll run this code right here, and only this code, whenever I click W. You see how it's lowercase? Because if you have caps lock on, it will not work. So if in a normal game, you usually only use all the normal keys, right? So whatever you type, it's always in lowercase. See, it's all in lowercase. So if I was to make that capital W, that means that it would not work unless the caps lock is on. Anyways, so now you see that paddle A is running, which means it'll run this specific code once, unless you hold the button, and then it'll run it continuously until it lets go of that button. And then it's basically the same thing for S for down for this one, and then up for this one because this is and also the up key. Because you can't click up because up and down arrows just move the text up and down as you see here. Basically, it will you have to type in capital U up and capital D down to write the arrow keys. And if you want it to be right, you need to write a capital R right and capital L left. Okay, and then that just moves everything around. So then that means that paddle A is going to be bound to W and S, and paddle B is going to be bound to the up and down arrow keys. Okay, now main game loop. This means that while you are playing the game, these are the main rules. Like in a normal game, if I just stand still, like in a survival game, I will slowly lose hunger, right? So this is basically what that is doing, right? So this just means that it'll automatically update every faster than you can relatively see, so that when something's new is happening, it's happening immediately. Okay, so now this is moving the ball, right? So this just means that this is setting the y, this is just setting the x coordinate, this is setting the x coordinate plus the dx, which is basically, as we talked about here, it is just the amount of speed that it is moving, right? And then it's the same thing for y, except that it's moving the y coordinate. Then this is border checking. So this means that if it hits the top border or the bottom border, it will bounce like a normal pong, right? So basically, if the ball hits, this is what it means, if it hits the 290, which is basically the top of the, as you know, y coordinates, the top of the screen, right? So like if the ball hit here, it will then automatically times equal, which basically just means that it'll multiply the thing by -1. So that means it'll go down -1, right? You get what I'm saying here? and then it's basically the same thing for this one too, except that it's for the bottom one. And then you can tell that by because it's negative because the y is at the negative bottom, and you see that both of these are negatives because that's needed for it to work. Okay, then left and right border. You know, in Pong, it doesn't just bounce whenever it hits the right corner. No, it deletes itself, and then, oh god. Alright, headphones just died. You should be able to hear me now. Testing, 1, 2, 3. Okay, anyways. But as you know, whenever you hit and it hits this corner, it doesn't just bounce back. It hits this corner, it respawns in the middle, and it goes the opposite way, right? So basically, this is what that's doing. Whenever the x-coordinate hits this area right here, it will go to 0, 0, and it will go the opposite way that it was going. So like, if the game started off going this way, this time the ball will go this way. And then this score, this just adds the score so that you remember how the words said player A 0 points and then player B 0 points. This just means that the score will be added by 1. And then pen clear, that just makes it because if you don't do that, it will be 0 and then 1 overlaid on that. So like it'll be 2 numbers on top of each other and you can barely see it. Alright, and then this over here, it's just showing like this is going to be the basic thing. So like if you add 1, it won't change anything unless this is a brackets. I think that's what it's called. I think it's something different, but I don't care enough to try and say it. Anyways, this will just make it so that it's actually changeable instead of it just staying to the one thing. And then over here you can see the alignments, and it's the same thing as the text over back there. And then this is the format. The format is important because this is what makes it like a math equation. So that if you make it a math equation, that means that this is the math that it's trying to do, and then this is the actual, like, the things that are being changed. Because remember, we defined those, or we didn't define it, but it's technically, quote-unquote, defined as what it is. So that the score is 0, and the score B is also 0. So that means that they can be changed, that they can change their numbers, right? Alright, and then this is the same thing, except that in this one, it changes the left score to 1, and then continuously to 2, 3, 4. It goes on infinitely, so you can just keep on playing until you're bored, which is a bit anticlimactic, but still. And then this is basically the same thing, except that whenever it hits over here, it'll add a point over here. And then paddle bounce. Okay, so this is basically, oh wait, here. This is supposed to be paddle bounce left, because I forgot to change that. So basically, the paddle bounce right is what it takes for the ball to, instead of disappear whenever it hits the right coordinates, instead of it disappearing, or it just going straight through the little square rectangle, it'll actually bounce off the rectangle and keep on bouncing around and like hit based off the angle. So like if you hit it here, like on the very edge, it'll bounce like really far and not make it a harsh one, right? So basically, this means that the x coordinate is just before this coordinate right here. And then that means that if this and this happens, then something else different will happen. And you see how this is in parentheses? That is because if you don't do this, the ball, it can go behind the paddle, and then it'll just keep on bouncing behind the paddle until it just bounces off here, which isn't what we really want. So then this will just be y coordinates plus 40. That just means that it'll go the opposite way, and then negative 40. That just means that the the y coordinate will just go the other way. And then this is the same thing except for the left paddle. And then putting it all together, you will see this. You have to go to here. You'll see run current file in Python Interactive. Hopefully this works. Come on.